Well, hello there. It's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we have to talk about how some dealers seem to think that the market is in a certain place and other dealers seem to see reality. But before we get into this video, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. So to properly explain this topic, we need to first talk about how car markets are actually localized. Now, this is crazy to me personally, and I'll explain that in just a second, but that's just the reality of the car market that we live in. The average consumer is not willing to travel very far to purchase a car, maybe 30 to maybe 60 minutes. And so they are more worried about convenience rather than getting the best possible deal on a car. And so because customers don't really travel that far to get cars, that means that it creates all these like pockets of different car markets throughout the US. And the pricing differences that you can see on vehicles throughout different areas in the US is absolutely insane. You could have the exact same vehicle in one area of the US selling for significantly over, original MSRP, for example, and in another area, it could be selling for under MSRP. I mean, a good real life example is go look at Toyota 4Runner TRD Pros. There are certain areas in the US where they're selling for $10,000, $20,000 over MSRP, and then there are certain areas in the US where they're literally selling for invoice. Same exact vehicle, brand new, same condition, all that kind of stuff. And so that's just the things that you see. And, what I'll constantly see from people comment-wise is, oh, well, cars are cheaper in this area because, well, they put salt in the roads and this and that, so the condition's not as good. And it's like, no. Like, that is important for a car that's, 5, 10, 15 years old. But, like, when a car is maybe a year older or brand new, that stuff doesn't really matter. So that doesn't explain why the values are so much lower in one region versus another. And I guess the thing that really hits home to me personally with how crazy this is we have the internet, which means that you can shop for cars all around the country. There's so many websites that support this. And so you can see what the prices are for cars all around the country. And people don't really seem to want to do this. And then on top of that, cars happen to have wheels. Wheels happen to spin in circles and means that you can easily get a car from one area of the US to another area of the US. Transport is not all that expensive. I mean, you can literally, again, depending on the exact vehicle you're transporting, you can transport a car from like New York to, California for something like, maybe $2,000, $2,500, maybe $3,000, again, depending on the exact vehicle, which that's not nothing, but in the grand scheme of things, with how much people will pay over MSRP for certain vehicles, that can be a lot cheaper than the prices that people will pay in certain areas. So because these car markets are so localized, this pushes dealers to really only worry about their local market and not really worry about what's happening outside their market. Now, yes, people that work at dealerships will look at what's happening nationally and they'll look at what's happening in other regions to kind of gauge what could potentially come to their market. But at the end of the day, they're just worried about what the consumers are doing in their market and what their competitors are doing within their market. And so if a dealer in a certain region sees that their competitors are still charging price premiums over MSRP, then chances are they're going to continue to charge price premiums themselves as well. And then with consumers, again, not really willing to travel to purchase a car, that means that those consumers will kind of prop up this whole system. Now, obviously, consumers within a certain region can completely pull back and stop purchasing cars. And this is what we are starting to see within certain regions. But the thing that you have to understand is, although there has been a lot of pullback, the pullback hasn't been substantial enough for dealers to really want to push down the prices as far as they ought to really stir things up in the market. And to dive a little bit deeper into this particular section within the video, what you have to understand is with new car dealers, they're actually okay with having inventory on hand because that is what they are used to historically. They're used to having a bunch of inventory that they're not going to sell right away, that they're probably going to have to do some negotiating with, and that's just how things normally work within the car business. And so with all these videos saying that new car dealers are going to get crushed because, well, they have all this inventory that they're not having to pay flooring charges for, and it's going to cost them a bunch of money, and they're just not going to be able to survive because of it, there might be a little bit of truth to that with some small new car dealers, but with the large new car dealers, they're going to be completely fine. The dealers that are actually going to get crushed with the situation are used car dealers because, well, the flooring plans are only okay if you can make profit on the vehicles that you're selling, and used car dealers are going to struggle to make profit on their inventory if they paid too much for those vehicles, and that's what happens with a lot of used car dealers. So yeah, this is definitely bad news for used car dealers, but for new car dealers, the market's kind of just going back to normal. But although that is happening, they still don't want to, discount their inventory on a surface level. So they don't want to post these discounts on their website, and they definitely don't want to post them on their vehicles on the lot, because appearances are everything with dealers. Like, this is super important. If dealers have a super low price posted on their website and on their vehicles on their lot, then consumers are naturally going to assume that that product is struggling to sell. Again, it's all about the whole psychology of the situation. If you go into a store and you see clearance sale 50% off, you're going to assume that, oh, there might be something wrong with those items. Oh, someone didn't want them. If someone really wanted that item, then they would have purchased it. Now, I'm always the person that goes, ooh, clearance sale, and run to it, right? There's always that group of people, but for the majority of people, they don't run straight to the clearance rack. They go to the stuff that's a little bit more in demand, and cars work the same way. Dealers know this. And so if they continue to keep these addendums posted on their cars where they're charging, maybe only $1,000 or $2,000 over MSRP, which is still over MSRP, or maybe it's $5,000, $10,000 over MSRP, then it's going to make the average consumer that looks at their website or that goes into their lot think, well, maybe their car is overpriced, and some dealers understand that. Or what they'll really think is, oh, these cars still are in high demand, even though they have a lot of them. They're not lowering their prices, so obviously they're able to sell them, and so maybe I'm going to have to pay that price. And this is something that I get sent to me all the time via email and especially on Instagram lately. Everyone's messaged me on Instagram, which no complaints about that. It's a great platform, at least for certain things. But anyways, the point that I'm trying to make here is the messages that I get all the time are, hey, so this dealer is asking this much over MSRP. Should I pay this? Because because the person just assumes that because the dealer is asking that it's the vehicle's in high demand. And it's like, well, wait a second. If the vehicle is in such high demand, then would it be on the lot, right? Would it be sitting there? If it was in such high demand, someone would have already purchased it and they would have already paid that price. But the reason that nobody's purchased it and paid that price is because it's simply just priced too high. So don't just assume that these dealers are actually getting these over MSRP amounts on vehicles, and don't assume that there's no negotiating room off of those over MSRP amounts. So to pull everything together, car markets are localized. And so yes, car dealers will look at what's happening nationally, and they might even look at these crazy YouTube videos talking about how the car market is collapsing, but at the end of the day, they'll just pay attention to what's happening within their local market. And so if their competitors are pricing cars at a certain rate, they will price their cars at that rate as well. And this goes for both the new car market and the used car market. And so understand that you could not only find a new car that is identical in another place for less money, you could also find a used car that is identical for less money in another place. Now, the used car market tends to somewhat be a little bit more homogenous across the country, but again, there are definitely a lot of exceptions where certain used cars are just worth significantly more. The example I always give on this channel is when I sold my 2020 Ford Raptor, I ended up getting $5,000 more for it by selling it here in Utah rather than in Texas, because in Texas, there just wasn't as much of a market for my Raptor at the time that I sold it. And so, again, you always want to do your shopping as a consumer. The less lazy that you are with your shopping process, the more potential you have to save money. And generally, you just really are going to save money. So if in your local market cars seem overpriced because dealers are charging over MSRP, well, first off, it never hurts to ask. If a dealer has a bunch of crazy, items put on cars and all these market adjustments and everything, just say, hey, would you be willing to sell it to me without all that stuff on it? And if they say no, then go online. Again, the internet exists, and start looking outside of your market and see if every single dealer is charging that type of markup on that car. And I think what you will find is with certain cars, that could definitely be the case. But with most vehicles, 99% of vehicles, that is not the case. For 99% of vehicles that are on the market today, having market adjustments on them, considering what those cars are selling for on the used market and the production numbers on those cars, it just doesn't make sense. The market adjustments don't make sense. If it's a regular run-of-the-mill pickup truck or SUV, anything like that, that is not super low production, that is super special with an enthusiast base behind it, The market adjustments don't make sense. The only reason why dealers are doing that is because of perception. They want you to think that the car market is still super aggressive and that people are still paying top dollar for cars when they're not. So just don't play the game, right? I think it is as simple as that. And I think the other thing you need to understand is, just because other consumers within your region are doing that, it doesn't mean that you have to follow suit as well. That's the other thing, is what you have to understand is with most consumers that are shopping for a car, they're not going to do any research about the car buying process. They're just going to dive in and buy a car. And so they're going to probably pay these price premiums because they just don't know any better. But if you happen to, have spent the time to do the research to know better, then know better, right? Do the right thing. Anyways, that's going to sum things up for today's video, talking about how car markets are localized and how you'll still have some dealers that will continue to ask for over MSRP, whereas other dealers that are pretty close by will not be asking for over MSRP, potentially even under MSRP. So just be willing to, look in different areas. Anyways, I'll see you.